while. One of the features of old age is one's memory is not what it was, and one tends to go to sleep in the afternoon. What I will say does depend on a fairly shaky memory, and I will try to do my best not to go to sleep, at any rate, during the next few minutes. I'm not a professor, unlike most of the people talking. I don't have a law degree. I spent 45 years of my life within the formal legal and judicial system in this country, finishing up near the top of our Court of Appeal. But for the last 8 years, I've been involved with NGOs doing remarkable things in different ways, including Prisoners of Conscience, who are one of the two co-hosts of this, and you will see the work that we do on the final page of your program. But I haven't come here to talk about that. When I was first approached 5 years ago by Babak and others to chair the event at the Inner Temple about the horrifying events in Iranian prisons in 1988, I was remembering struck by them saying that these were frightful events about which the world knows nothing. The world has passed them by. And that event, which some of you will remember in the Inner Temple in, I think, September 2009, led to the Iran Tribunal. And unhappily at the time, it may have been happily, I don't know, I was suffering from rather peculiar illness, so that I had to turn down the invitation to be a member of the tribunal. Why I volunteered to fill a short gap today is the reference to the Rio Montt case, which Susan Kemp would have spoken of much more authoritatively than I can. The interesting thing about the Rio Montt case, and I'll come to it in a moment, is that this was another case in which horrifying events many years ago were being brought to life, not at a tribunal, not within the context of an international human rights court, but in a criminal trial for the former dictator of a country for genocide in his own country. And that was a first. I'll come to the Rio Montt case in a moment, but I'd like to put a little bit of it into context in the work that Peace Brigades International, of which I'm a patron of its UK branch, does, because it illustrates the different contexts in which these investigations may take place. Very soon after the Iran event in the Inner Temple, I invited my friend, the great English judge Tom Bingham, who had just retired, to chair an evening at which a brave woman was taking the Mexican government to the Inter-American Court of Human Rights in relation to the disappeared in Mexico in the early 1970s. Her father had just been taken away and they never saw him again, have no idea what happened to him. And she, in a way, was representative of many, many other women and the children of the men who had been taken away in Mexico. There, the vehicle for achieving right, 40 years later, or 35 years later, was into the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. And that court ruled against the Mexican government, overruled arguments that this was all too long ago and governed by statute of limitation, and made orders that the Mexican government should no longer allow military tribunals to judge these cases, where almost certainly the military were at fault, but they should be judged in the national lay courts. Well, that was one vehicle for dealing with horrors of the past, and it gave a huge amount of comfort to those whose fathers, husbands, grandfathers just vanished, that justice was being done in this way. Another country in which the PBI is currently involved is Nepal. Similar but different. There, horrifying events were going on until 2006, whether they were the Maoists, whether they were the royalists, whoever they were, the kind of inhumanities of which we've heard, sadly, far too much, all too much, and quite rightly too much, quite rightly a great deal today. There, the situation is different because the politicians are now having made up in the way that the politicians in Northern Ireland have made up, are very keen to move on. And although there's talk of a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the politicians brought a universal amnesty, which they persuaded the president to sign, for everybody, for anything which happened before 2006. In the event the Constitutional Court in Nepal had struck that down, and there was a huge international hullabaloo about it. We sent a delegation there quite recently. And this is interesting in the context of the Rios-Montt case, because part of the exercise there, if there's going to be some kind of justice as seen by those who have suffered so much, whether it is in the context of a properly constituted Truth and Reconciliation Commission, or whether it is the context of a People's Tribunal, the task of getting the evidence together, organising it, getting statements, bringing the material in a coherent way from so many broken people to whatever commission or tribunal or court or whatever is a major exercise, of which most countries of this kind do not have any skills or expertise. Well, that's the context in which I want to say a few words about the Rios-Montt case. It's very much second or third hand, unlike what you would have had from Susan Kemp. But I chaired a meeting in London about a year ago at which Senator Perez, who was the Guatemalan lawyer who had coordinated the getting of the evidence for the genocide trial and had worked in collaboration with the prosecutors in Guatemala, who had no previous experience of this kind of exercise. And he told of the laborious, expensive, time-consuming process of bringing all this evidence together for the purposes of a criminal trial, bringing the witnesses there, or their statements might be taken in writing, and day after day, this evidence was put on the public record of a criminal trial in a national court in the same way that the Iran tribunal evidence and the evidence in other people's tribunals is brought together. In the event, and I can't really remember the details of what he said, that case is still not fully resolved. The judge convicted the Mr. Montt of genocide. The judge in a national court, it wasn't Nuremberg International Justice, a national judge in a national court was convicting a former dictator of genocide in relation to events which had happened more than 25 years ago. In the event, the Constitutional Court set aside the conviction in a rather peculiar way, set aside the last 4 or 5 weeks of the trial and directed that the trial should restart where things had gone wrong 4 or 5 weeks before the end of the trial. What had allegedly gone wrong, so far as I can remember, is that a lawyer turned up who was a complete menace to any kind of orderly conduct of a criminal trial, and didn't know very much about all the evidence which had so far been produced. And eventually, the judge didn't send him off to a sin bin, just said, well, we'll get on without you. And that was regarded by the Constitutional Court, and there was certainly criticism that it was taking a political rather than a legal approach to the exercise of a judge's discretion as sufficient to set aside the last 5 weeks of the trial and the conviction. I really can't remember the latest state of play in Colombia, and I know that it hasn't yet reached finality with the different rulings made by different courts. But what is important, and I remember Mr. Perez making it completely clear that whatever the ultimate result may be formally, the fact that those people had had the chance to come up, to be listened, to give evidence, can't be taken away by whatever judges or politicians may do hereafter. This was an almost unique event in bringing a former dictator charged with genocide in his own country to justice. And that was a forum in which, different from a People's Tribunal, different from a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, different from any other kind of vehicle, the needs which we've heard so eloquently expressed today were so vividly met. I see that Susan Kemp's topic was the role of civil society in promoting strategic litigation. And that is really what it's all about in this kind of world. The prosecutors can't do much, even if they're given a head, without civil society, NGOs working overtime to ensure that evidence is got together and brought to one place, in the same way as happened with the Iran Tribunal. Thank you for listening to me. I'm sure that I got a little bit of it wrong. Forgive my old age. If Methuselah comes and talks at a seminar like this, he sometimes gets things wrong. But I thought it would be useful not to allow Susan's absence to go by without some kind of reference to the remarkable trial which occurred recently and is still allegedly going on in Guatemala. Thank you.